thank you so much for joining us on this edition of DCA Replay. Can we start off by, can you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Brian DiNapoli. I'm with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. I've been with DCA for about 20 years, so it's been a great run.
Alrighty. And so you're with DCA. What exactly do you do here? Like, what's your title?
I'm the Reentry Partnership Housing Community Liaison.
And what about other things like outside of DCA? General things like the experience. What's your general field of experience?
So I used to be a probation officer. My first job out of college, I worked as a probation officer for the Georgia Department of Corrections. I did that for about 7 or 8 years, and then I did some work with my brother who has a company, and I transferred to DCA, and this has definitely been my most favorite position and best agency I've ever worked with.
We're very happy to hear that. And so with DCA, you work with the Reentry Partnership Housing Program. Can you start off by telling us what exactly is that and a little bit of its history?
Yes, sir. Well, in a nutshell, it's a program that provides transitional housing for up to 6 months for people who are coming out of jail or prison and they're homeless or do not have a housing plan, or they're under felony supervision. For instance, if they're on probation or parole for theft by taking and they become homeless during that duration, then they're eligible for reentry partnership housing. Also, if they're remanded to an accountability court, examples drug court, mental health court, veterans court, those are typically 24-month programs. If they're homeless during any of that duration, they're eligible for RPH for up to 6 months.
Okay, wow. So how exactly does this work exactly? And there's this thing called the Fresh Start exactly. Can you explain to us what exactly is like the operational process for the reentry program?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an incredible partnership. We have a total of 4 agencies involved in this. We have Georgia Department of Community Affairs, our agency. We have Georgia Department of Community Supervision, and they make all the placements. We have Georgia Department of Corrections, and they oversee the prisons. Then we have the Council of Accountability Court Judges, and they oversee the accountability courts throughout Georgia. And there's over 150 accountability courts. We're a trailblazer when it comes to accountability courts, and excited to have them as a partner. They came on board in 2018.
Okay, so how exactly does like one particular individual, how did they get involved in it exactly?
Yeah, excellent question. So DCS Department of Community Supervision, when someone is coming out of jail or prison or they're about to be paroled, their counselor in the prison checks to see if they have an address. If they do not have a residence, then the counselor talks to them about RPH to see if it would be a good fit. And then the counselor on the prison links up with the Department of Community Supervision, their housing staff, to see if they can link them with housing. We have 50 providers throughout the state, from up in North Georgia and Gainesville, from all the way down south to Savannah. So that's one avenue they can, when they are in prison, their counselor refers them to Department of Community Supervision staff to see if there's a fit for them. Another avenue, I briefly mentioned it before, if they're on probation or parole during their duration, anytime they become homeless, their supervising officer would make a referral for RPH housing with the community supervision housing staff. Then if they're in an accountability court, while they're being sentenced, if they're homeless, then the accountability court staff would make a referral. There's a referral form that they fill out. And these are pretty easy to do. They're pretty streamlined. A lot of them are automated. So they make that referral. Or if they're homeless during that duration, typically 24 months for an accountability court, then they go into RPH housing. It really is a win-win. It saves the state millions of dollars. When someone's locked up, they really essentially lose everything: their relationships, housing, jobs, all that really disintegrates. So this gives them really a hand up when they get out, and really a fresh start. And it frees up beds for more violent offenses. So it's can't say enough great things about the program. I used to be a probation officer, and when I was a probation officer right out of college, someone coming out just received $25 in a bus ticket, so they were automatically set up to fail. So this is really great. Everyone seems to agree we had a problem with the prison system, so we needed reform, and this is an excellent step in the right direction.
Well, we have something what's called an RPH Certified Provider. Could you explain to us briefly what exactly is that and how can someone become such a thing?
Yeah, great question. And mainly my job is to recruit more providers for the program. It's a very unique program. The program was created back in 2006. At that time, it was for just people coming out of prison that were homeless. It was expanded in 2015 to include probationers. So anyone on probation could be homeless. And I use that, could be eligible for the program. I use that example. If they become homeless during their probation sentence, then they can be eligible for RPH. And then, of course, the accountability court. So the providers, we reimburse the providers. We're the fiscal agent, DCA, for the program, and we issue contracts for the providers. We reimburse providers $750 to $850 a month per individual per month for up to that 6 months. And the provider just has to provide the housing. They provide the housing, and they make sure that the individuals have access to food. So there's typically 2 cycles per year to become a provider, one in the spring and one in the fall, and that begins. The first process begins in March, what's called an intent to apply or pre-application. They submit that. Anyone who's interested, it's on our website and it's on the Department of Community Supervision's website. Then in April, there's a workshop on how to complete the application. DCA and Department of Community Supervision, we team together and conduct these workshops and go line by line on how to complete the application. And then in May, the application's available. Because of COVID this year, of course, it hit right in the middle of this cycle, so we moved it forward to the fall cycle. So this year, the application cycle will be in August for an intent to apply, to submit the intent to apply for agencies interested. And then in September, we'll have the workshops, and then in October, the application will be available. So all of those that submitted intent to apply in March, even though we did not have a provider application cycle, they'll get rolled over and they'll be eligible, once the provider application cycle kicks off this late summer that I just explained.
Okay. So I guess just a quick follow-up question. The intent to apply form is due this August. September, there's a mandatory application workshop, and then you actually complete the application in October. About how long would it take after you complete the application in October? Could they expect to expect for the process to be completed?
Yeah, that's a great question, Marquise. It would probably take at least 2 to 3 months while we review all the applications, and our partnering agency, Community Supervision, has to go out and inspect the units to make sure that they pass compliance. So with all that, going through all the applications, and then it may take a couple months. To apply, providers do need to have zoning. It needs to be zoned for local zoning department has to understand it will be for returning citizens, for people coming out of jail or prison, or that are currently under felony supervision. And as far as who can apply, it can be a for-profit, a nonprofit, or even a sole proprietor, an individual that owns a home. They would have to file with the Georgia Department of Revenue and have a business license. And we would also ask for some financial filings for a nonprofit or for-profit or a sole proprietor, for instance, tax returns or an IRS filings for nonprofits. So we'll ask for things like that. And if they have any experience working with accountability courts or doing anything in the community, perhaps running a food bank, that type of thing, we're looking. They do not necessarily have to have experience housing returning citizens. It's helpful, but they do not necessarily have to have experience. Really just have to have a passion to do this and be financially solvent to become a provider, and of course to have property and have the zoning.
All right. Well, I believe you may have briefly mentioned this, but have people ever expressed any concerns regarding like the rehabilitation of people who have previously been incarcerated in your personal experience?
Absolutely, we have. I would say, all of the providers, their number one passion is to help people.
Mm.
The money, the 750 a month, is really secondary. A lot of the agencies that we have, they have sort of in-house programs and apprenticeship type programs where they're linking up with employers in the community. They'll have counseling, job counseling, or they're referring them to services. Also, their supervising officer will work with them on linking them with services. It could be, anger management or drug and alcohol counseling, job placement, obtaining job skills, GED, things like that. So between the providers and the supervising officer, they do an excellent job of trying to provide those wraparound services to help them get better. And we hear success stories all the time. Someone that recently graduated from one of the Reentry Partnership Housing programs is now working at that agency. So there's numerous success stories. The majority of them, over 75%, are either reuniting with family or moving on to supporting housing on their own. And the majority of them are employed. Even during this difficult time during the pandemic, a lot of them are maintaining employment, or were able to receive unemployment because they were working. But those that aren't working, most of the agencies also do a great job of getting them to do volunteer work in the community. They really become a family when they're in there, especially when they're making dinner. During that time, they forge a bond and become a family, and they'll have returning set of people who have been through the program before, graduated, and have moved on to become successful. They'll come back and be a mentor for many of the agencies. So hear great things from the agencies. Of course, it's challenging now with the pandemic, but they're all really hustling and doing a great job. Our providers, and we're very, very happy with them.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. And so before we close out, was there anything left that you wanted to mention? Any other ideas, last thoughts that I haven't asked about yet?
I'm a big quote person. I want to end with this quote: everyone needs something to do, something to believe in, and something to hope for. So that's ultimately what we want for our returning citizens and help them become productive members. And thank you for your time, Marquise. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us. That was
Thank
Brian
you.
DiNapoli of the Reentry Partnership Housing Program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.